album.
I know, and it is interesting. One of the things that I do find frustrating is that the concept of an album has definitely slipped back. So we are very much back to what we were in the 50s, with it all being uh, about about singles. I mean, occasionally they'll get deep into two albums, and things like Boy Genius, I think, was a good example of that, with an album that really connected. But for most of the time, it's just tracks on playlists. Um,
Yeah, I must confess, I'm guilty of that myself.
it's
I
like I
am.
just got. I mean, it's interesting. I got sent a new album by a band I used to work with, and so especially when it's somebody I know, and the manager sent me the music and says, "Oh, let us know what you think of this, Mike." And I feel, right, I've got to do this properly. So I listened to it once and go, this is all right. This, and I'll go back again. I go, actually, it's really. And the more I'd go back, he was going, "Fuck me, this is the best thing they've done in over 15 years. This is a really good record." And it did remind me of just how rare it is. I agree that I would listen to something intensely and really try and understand it and engage with it in that way. All too often I'll listen to the album, but just like you said, I am guilty of just going back and just listening to one or two tracks that I really like.
Yeah, yeah. I guess there are some pros and cons, but yeah, there's nothing. I do sort of try and force myself sometimes. Just put on one album in the car and not the usual
I mean, what I
pen
always
drive
used to find so
playlist.
irritating about Spotify was that ability, was that it would play music to you from an album out of sequence. And it's just
Mm,
like, hang on, there's so much time and effort and energy has gone to playing that in sequence. No way I'm sorry, I'm
yeah,
not having it that an algorithm, and it probably wasn't even anything sophisticated when they started doing that, is going to tell me there's a better sequence for this album. And even if
just
there
think
is
of
a
the art.
better sequence, you buy the album because the artist is saying, this is the body of work
Yeah,
I put together. You don't buy a book and go, you know what, I want to read these chapters in random order.
yeah.
There is a
Just
reason.
imagine the amount of arguments in the studio about no, it's going seventh, not eighth.
Oh, I've been there. Weeks have gone by having really terrible arguments about that. I mean, it's. I mean, I'm putting a record together at the moment, and it's a reissue of some tracks by a fantastic band from the '80s called Boys Wonder, and we're putting it
Mm.
out on an independent record label I'm involved with called Scared Hitless. And yeah, getting the track listing right for that has been really, really tough. And I think we're there. I mean, at the end of the day, look, it's the artist is the person that needs to live with it and tell us what they want to go with. But we'll
Yeah.
certainly have an opinion.
Can I go back when you were talking about the A&R man's job is to get the song on the radio?
Yeah.
Can you think of any times when a band came, or, were pushing to put something on that you thought that's the Radio One are never going to go with
Yeah,
that?
absolutely. I mean, and it happened many, many times. And it's interesting because I think this is the difference between a major label and an independent label. I think an independent label, and again, these are sweeping generalizations, but the great thing about an independent record label is usually the artist gives them the album and they sit there and go, right, we're going to figure out how to make this a success. We're going to figure out how we're going to sell this. Whereas with a major label, you are usually wrestling with that artist right from the minute the demos arrive, and sort of like diving in deep, choosing the singles that are going to be on the radio. And often it will be like, let's just concentrate on getting three. Three. Three's a great thing, but even just like one or two fantastic singles that we can take to radio, will get played to death on radio, and off the back of that, we'll have a successful record. And one always sticks with me, which was a band I loved called The View, who were from Dundee. And they were one of the first bands I was working with at Columbia Records. They were signed to a label called 1965, which was run by James Endicott, who'd been the A&R guy at Rough Trade, who'd discovered and worked with the Libertines. And The View were in a similar spirit to the Libertines, very exciting guitar-based garage rock and roll band from Dundee, from Dryburgh, which, I mean, Dundee's not the great, Dundee is a tough, poor town. Dryburgh is a very tough part of Dundee. So they came from a dirt poor community. And what I loved about them is that they did have these great, it was a great, exciting, thrilling garage rock and roll band. But Kyle Faulkner, the singer-songwriter in the band, had an amazing ear for melody, and they had really beautiful songs in there, which I, felt could take them to the very top of the game. And we'd released 3 fantastic singles as a run-in to the release of the album. Off the back of that, the album I think the album went in at 1. I think we sold 110,000 records in the first week. An amazing start. And very quickly, the album went to platinum. And I had a very clear idea of, the singles I was going to release that was going to take this record to, we had big commercial, beautiful, fantastic melodic pop songs on the record that could take us all the way. And I never forget the band coming in and going, "Oh, mate, no, we don't want to be the Kooks, man." And it's just sort of like, but you'll never be the Kooks guys, and they were just worried about being seen as this, they were worried about being seen as a pop band and not being seen as an edge. They adored the Libertines, and that's what they wanted to be seen as, and they were worried they were being pushed by me to be a pop group because they had these amazing pop songs. And they were, they really, they wanted to try and, slow things down. And they wanted to release a single called Skag Trendy, which is, a song making a very, very relevant point, in the way that Alex Turner would have done in a possibly slightly more sophisticated way. Well, as indeed he did do with Fake Tales, Fake Tales of San Francisco and Skag Trendy, essentially the same kind of idea, that you've got somebody co-opting a particular lifestyle, but isn't the real deal.
T-shirt and ties combination.
Yeah, but there's a big difference. Yeah, anyway. You're not going to get a song called Skag Trendy played on the radio, and it's not that strong a song either. That's the frustrating thing. Fake Tales of San Francisco is a truly fabulous piece of music. Skag Trendy was not. And it was a double A side, and both sides were not particularly commercial songs, were not particularly radio friendly songs. The band insisted upon doing it. I, as the head of the record company, could have turned around and gone, "I'm sorry, guys, you're out of your mind. I'm not going to let you do this. This is going to damage your career. We're going to go with this." But I didn't. I felt I was artist friendly. I listened to what the artists had to say. I told them, this is what will happen if we put this record out. But if you want me to put this record out, this is what I'm here to do. And we did put it out. We took it to radio, and they never sold another record on that album again. The record sales of that album stopped dead. Couldn't get it played on the radio, and it was really tough to get the band's career going after that. And looking back, I regret that I took that course of action. I think I should have been stronger with the band and explained to them, whilst it's your decision and this is what you want to do, I don't think you appreciate the damage that this record can potentially do to your career. And
well, probably damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, but it just frustrated me, because consistently throughout their career they've made superb records, and I do not feel they're taken as seriously as they should be. And I feel if I'd have navigated our way through the release of that first record properly, we could have set them. I mean, it's great that they still have a career, particularly in Scotland. They're still a big band. They can still play to 5,000 people a night.
Right.
But the View are a really special band, and they deserve more acclaim than they have.
When we spoke to our mutual friend Tim, the
Yeah.
photographer for NME, we asked him, can you, all the gigs you went to, which ones stand out as you realized at the time you were seeing something for the first time, but you were seeing something special? And he talked about seeing Jeff Buckley at the Borderline. Could I ask what would be your two or three of
Yeah,
ones that
I wish I could.
first evers? Maybe
I
there were too many.
No. I mean, it's interesting that I think seeing the White Stripes at the Tough. Well, it was in Tufnell Park. It was the Boston Arms. That was
No.
pretty spectacular, and not long after that was the 100 Club as well, which was equally phenomenal. And you knew you were seeing something very special. I mean, I would say the same about. It's interesting because you see those those discovery gigs, like I'll never forget the first time I saw the Arctic Monkeys, or when I first saw Blur at the Bull and Gate in Kentish Town. But was that I saw more exciting, and I mean when I saw Blur in New York for the first, it was the first time it was the first gig they played in America. It was at the old Marquee Club, and that was a really special gig to be witnessing a band that you've worked with start to connect with a completely new audience and a new culture. That was something wonderful. Arcade Fire at the Mercury Lounge in New York. It was during
Were they
seeing.
unsigned at the time?
Yeah, they were. They released the first album, their mini album, on Merge, so that was out. So that was creating momentum. And a friend of mine, Paul Jones, who was a guitarist in a band called Linoleum I'd worked with, and I think at that time was working at Rough Trade. He said, "Oh, you should check out this band Arcade Fire." And I think probably Rough Trade were looking at them at the time. And they were playing, it was at the Mercury Lounge, it's a tiny room, probably holds about 200 people. And it's a nightmare to get into. And just because you've got your CMJ badge doesn't mean you're getting in. And I've been in that situation many times before and had to find different ways to blag your way in. So I thought I'll get there early. And I went in, I got there at 9, and they were due on at 11. And Lou Barlow from Sebado was doing a solo set. So I had to, and I like Lou Barlow, but it was a 2.5 hour solo set from him, which was hard work. And then so that got to about 11:30, midnight. And this is I've just arrived in New York that day, so I've got jet lag. And finally at 1 o'clock, and I'm literally, dropping backwards on my feet. I'm so tired. And Arcade Fire come on, and the first song they play is Wake Up. And I've never known music have that rejuvenative effect that song did. It
Very
was just
aptly
like
named.
such a, yeah. It was like being connected to the mains. And it's that rare thing after the show. I mean, I don't, the last thing I usually like doing is going backstage after a gig and going, "Hi, I'm I'm from a big cheesy music publishing company, and I thought you guys were great." Especially when clearly a lot of people have, the album had been out for a while. They were getting a bit of attention in America. People have been telling them they were great, and they weren't stupid. They knew they were great. But at the same time, it was just like, I've got to work with this band, this band. And I'd been feeling a bit down. I hadn't seen much music that I'd liked for a few months, and they really did restore my faith in what I did for a living. And I remember on that
Yeah,
trip, I saw them, and I saw Be Your Own Pet, And both of those bands, I mean, I loved Be Your Own Pet as well. I thought they were really
I
smart.
don't know them.
Oh, they're an amazing band from Nashville, and they've actually
Okay.
just released an album. They've got back together again. They put one album out. I think they were signed. Was it signed to V2? Um, and they were very young, so they were a female-fronted guitar band from Nashville. And I think Jemima Pearl, who was the singer, was only 15 when they started. So it was, a whole load of pressure came down on them very quick. A lot of expectation. Made a brilliant debut punk rock record. Anyway, they've recently got back together, signed to Third Man, put a new album out, which is just fab. Well worth checking out if you like
Okay.
exciting sort of like rock and roll bands. They're a great band. But yeah, they were the other band on that trip that I loved and wanted to sign.
What are Arcade Fire like? Are they?
People.
Is it? Yeah. Well, is it mainly the guy, or are they quite
No,
democratic?
not at all. So when I've sort of like tried to connect with them, and I'm not sure whether Scott Roger, who went on to manage them, was involved at the time, or whether he was still maneuvering to get involved with them. The meeting I had to wait till they came to the UK, and I had a meeting with Win and Regine, and that's an intimidating partnership. It was quite an intense meeting, but it's that's what you do. That's the job, and I basically going in with the opinion that they probably think I'm an arsehole, so I've got to do everything I can to try and convince them I'm a decent human being. And in every way, Win's an imposing dude. He's a tall guy, serious guy. Clearly, they're both musically very sophisticated. I mean, I'm in awe of their musical abilities. Very intense people. But we just went off, had a bite to eat, found some common ground. But they were people. They were not they were people you needed to work really hard to sort of like earn their trust and
Yeah.
to sort of like have a level of engagement with. Other members of the band were much easier to get along with, and so but you definitely got the sense that Win and Regine were the engine of the band. But having said that, every meeting that I had with the band subsequent to that, all of the members were there, and so I did get to build a relationship like that. But you would, if you went backstage, you wouldn't necessarily rush straight to Win or Regine, because
Wow.
you'd
Yeah.
probably. I mean, hey, it's like towards the latter days with Oasis, I'd probably start a conversation with Gem backstage rather than rush over to say to Liam or Noel what I thought of the show. It's what you do.
I guess, as I say, I could just ask hundreds of questions about all the different bands you've signed. Could you tell us about Elastica a bit?
Yeah. I
Was
mean,
that Were they from demos or
no,
from
no, no, no.
did you see them or?
I knew Justine from when she'd been in Suede, and Damon had asked me for her number.
In what? Sorry, I just
Sorry,
lost your
yeah.
connection for a second.
I'd known Justine from when she'd been the guitarist in Suede, and
All right.
Suede supported Blur at a show in Brighton, and Damon asked me the following day if I had a number. So I'd known her for a while, and in sort of like the summer of 1992, she came to me and sort of said, "Look, I'm thinking of getting a band together. Do you know any musicians? I've got Justin as a drummer. He'd been a drummer briefly with Suede, but she was looking for other musicians. So I was chatting to our studio engineer, Mark Waterman at EMI, and he mentioned Annie Holland, who was a guitar player. So she came up, she met Justine, they got on like a house on fire. and they put an advert in the Melody Maker, and off the back of that, Donna, they had about 15, 16 interviews, the usual, atrocious collection of people. But Donna came through, and that was somebody that really connected. So again, so like Justine, Donna, Annie, Justin, 4 very different, disparate people, yet they had a fantastic connection and a gang-like mentality. And I think it was really good. I think Justine had a really strong instinct about who to surround herself with that could, make the band really, really special. And it's funny, at the time, I'd become a bit disillusioned with the music industry in the summer of '92, and I'd enrolled in art school, and I was going to go to art school that autumn. And then we did the demos, and the first demos came back, and I think it was Line Up and Vaseline were on those first demos. And I was just like, oh my God, this is the best band I've discovered whilst I've been in the music industry. This is why I got into the music industry. Blondie were in many ways the perfect blueprint of a brilliant pop group that were also sophisticated and artistic and challenging and edgy. And I suddenly thought, oh my God, this Elastica could be this band. And I deferred my place at art school, and we demoed them again, and the next demos came in, and it was another 3 brilliant songs, and I went to see them in rehearsal, and they were just great. And I loved them so much. They were the one band that I've worked with in my career that I actually thought, you know what, I'd give up my job to manage this band. I really, really feel they're so special. And then, but sensibly, I didn't. I finally got to do. I was doing everything with them at that time. I was, designing the logo and doing artwork with them. I was driving the van, helping them manufacture T-shirts. We was properly, doing everything you would do. You couldn't have had a more hands-on publisher. That was the lovely thing. We really, as a publisher and an A&R person, for me, that was probably one of the closest relationships I've ever had with the band, that you actually really got involved with the genesis and the start of it all. And then, they didn't want to sign to a major label. Justine really liked Steve Lamacq. He was getting a new label together called Deceptive. And so they put the record through that. They signed with Geffen in North America. And we got the album together, a lot of which was, built really on the recordings that we'd done in our little demo studios at EMI on Oxford Street. And, we had an amazing run. And being with Elastica was one of the most fun periods of my life. And I was so proud because I just felt what I loved about Elastica is that I felt they did offer a very different idea of what a woman in the music industry could be. So many women that I know were inspired by that band. Indeed, I met my wife because she was going to buy tickets to see Elastica, and that's how we met. But I think she was, well, all of them were, but Justine in particular was an incredibly good role model, for as a strong woman, competing absolutely toe to toe with her male counterparts. And I think to have her as a role model of what a female musical artist could be was really, really important. And I was very proud to be part of that, as much as, and they were, they were just really funny people. They were, they had great taste. I absolutely loved spending time with them. That was one of the, but that was definitely, 93 and 94 with Elastica were fantastic times, especially as the record blew up in America. They had a gold album in America as well. So it was the first time I'd had a band that had really connected internationally. So we traveled around the world a lot together. Yeah, it was a really, really special time.
Are you still in touch? You still
Yeah,
friends?
absolutely. So, I mean, I sadly don't get to speak to Justine.
Because she not doing. She's now teaching at
Well,
university, or what does she do
she
now?
left England for America around about 2004, 2005, and went to study um, art. No,
Architecture?
she went to study art therapy.
No.
She couldn't do
Oh.
music therapy because she didn't have the right qualifications, but because she had an architecture degree, she could do art therapy. So she
Uh-huh.
went and studied that, I think in Oregon, and she ended up marrying a professor that she met out there, and they live out in San Francisco now, out on the coast,
Mm,
and she has a good life out there. Um, a lot more
great
sedate.
stuff.
She makes art. You know, I think she found herself going down the visual art career, but decided it was probably too much like the music business in terms of the kind of star system and bullshit. So she wasn't really that keen on that.
Yeah.
But she does make. I mean, Justine's always made some amazing art. I've got that picture behind me. There's one she did. What year is that? 2018. So she was.
So show us again, Mike.
Okay.
You just cut out just as you showed it to me.
So that's a
Okay.
piece I got. I persuaded her to give us some. We were doing a Teenage Cancer Trust art auction, and she was very
Yes.
kind enough.
I was going to ask you about
Yeah,
that.
she was kind enough to donate us some art for that. But yeah, I mean, Justin, I keep in much better contact with. He's obviously drumming with the Jesus and Mary Chain these days. He's got his own band called Air Cooled, who are a kind of krautrock, motoric kind of outfit. They're brilliant. He lives in St
Mm.
Leonard's on Sea. Yeah, he's lovely. Annie, I've seen a few times since then. Donna, I see less of, but she's making music. She's doing art. I'm really really pleased that they're all doing well, and they are all doing well. So it's
Great
I
stuff.
look forward. I wish they could be persuaded to all come back together and do a gig one day. I mean, never say never. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd love. I hope it would be good to get a reissue of The Menace, the second album, because that's a fantastic record that deserves, I think, reappraisal. It was a lot more future forward thinking than I think people gave it credit for. The problem was in 2001, people were still wanting them to make a new version of their debut album, and they were coming with something that was much
Mm.
more beats heavy. And I think Justine, she was living with MIA at the time, and I think that was more the direction she wanted to take the band in. Yeah,
Really?
and
I didn't know
yeah,
that.
no, that's how I got to know MIA through. I mean, MIA was Maya was lodging with Justine. So I demoed, the first demos that Maya did were done in the EMI studios.
Ah, wow.